Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My best friend and I decided to visit our local theme park during their Halloween special week. Both of us, 25 female, had been looking forward to this day for weeks, especially since we hadn't had much time to catch up lately due to our busy work schedules. We knew the park would be crowded during school holidays, but nothing could have prepared us for the sheer number of people there that day. The wait times for popular rides were reaching 90 minutes. But we didn't mind. We had our hot pumpkin soup and plenty of catching up to do. What really started getting to us was a constant line cutting. All day long, we watched people use the oldest trick in the book, claiming they had family waiting ahead in line. I'm usually pretty calm about these things, but after seeing two youth group leaders cut in line with their 20 kids, my patience was wearing thin. My friend and I were determined not to let anyone else cut in front of us. That's when we spotted a woman trying to squeeze past everyone behind us. We exchanged knowing looks and subtly positioned ourselves to block the path. The woman approached me with the typical excuse about her family waiting ahead in line, asking if she could pass through. I simply told her no. She looked at me like I had just told her the earth was flat. That's when I noticed my friend was having an identical conversation with a man who was dragging a young boy behind him. Initially, we thought they were together, but when we called them out on it, the woman actually laughed and clarified that they weren't together at all. She really thought this would help her case. Two different entitled people trying to cut at the exact same time. It was the last straw. The man became aggressive and started shoving people aside, pulling his poor 7-year-old son along. Nobody wanted to risk hurting the child, so people reluctantly let them through. But we stood our ground with a woman and her teenage daughter. What followed was a 20-minute negotiation attempt. She tried every excuse in the book, appealing to holiday spirit, pointing out how politely she had asked, and even suggesting it could be their last ride together as a family. To each attempt, I simply responded with a firm no. I eventually stopped responding and just sipped my soup while she continued her monologue. That's when the woman turned to my friend, thinking she might find an ally in her silence. She suggested that my friend and I should discuss the matter before giving her a final answer. I reminded her that I had already given her multiple negative responses, but she insisted that I had never actually said no and demanded to hear my friend's thoughts. When I asked my friend with a smile what she thought about letting the woman pass, she responded with a loud and clear negative, accompanied by a chuckle. The woman's face turned red, and she accused us of being witches who were enjoying her torment. My friend quipped back that we were fitting right in with the Halloween season. That's when she tried to physically push past us. We were surprised by her boldness. Most people wouldn't dare get physical in a crowded place. When she became more aggressive, we let her through, only for her to face the same resistance from the family in front of us. I couldn't resist commenting that her behavior reminded me of my own mother's public tantrums, adding that I remembered how mortifying it was at her daughter's age. I looked at her teenage daughter who was desperately trying to become invisible behind her phone. The woman completely lost it. She started throwing her belongings at me, screaming that I couldn't possibly imagine having a mother like her. Security arrived just in time to drag her away, but not before one of her projectiles hit me in the head. I pressed charges for assault. As security escorted her away, she was still screaming about how unfair everything was. Her voice was so shrill that my ears were ringing for hours afterward. After all that drama, her family waiting ahead in line never materialized. Her daughter finally looked up from her phone long enough to mutter an apology before disappearing into the crowd, leaving her mother to deal with security on her own. I've been working at this retail store for about 3 years now, mainly in the home improvement department. One of our services is renting out Bissell carpet cleaning machines. You know, those bulky things people use maybe once or twice a year when their carpets need a deep clean. My shift that day started like any other. I was covering the return register because my co-worker called in sick. Again. Not that I'm complaining, the return desk is usually pretty straightforward. Check the receipt, inspect the item, process the return, done. At least, that's how it's supposed to go. Around midday, this guy walks up to my counter with one of our rental carpet cleaners. He looked like your typical suburban dad. Polo shirt, khakis, that kind of thing. Nothing about him screamed, "I'm about to make your day interesting." I greeted him with my usual customer service welcome, asking how I could help. He briefly responded that he was returning the carpet cleaner. He hands me the receipt and I start inspecting the machine, checking for damage, making sure all the parts are there, the usual routine. Everything looks good, so I begin processing the return. That's when he pulls out an unopened bottle of carpet cleaning solution and tells me he wants to return that too. I agreed to check it, keeping things professional. I examined the bottle to verify it hasn't been opened, store policy and all that. Then I scan the barcode to process the return, and that's where things get interesting. The solution isn't showing up on his receipt. Now, this happens sometimes. People mix up receipts or forget which transaction it was on. I politely explained to him that I couldn't find the solution on his receipt and asked if he might have a different receipt for it. His whole demeanor changes instantly. His face gets red, and he starts tapping his fingers on the counter impatiently. He angrily insisted that he bought it with the cleaner and that it was right there on the receipt. I tried to explain that while I could see the carpet cleaner rental on the receipt, the solution wasn't listed, and suggested he might have a separate receipt. That's when he accused me of calling him a liar and declared the situation ridiculous. He's getting louder now, and other customers are starting to look our way. I'm trying my best to keep my voice steady and professional. I attempted to explain again that sometimes items get rung up separately and asked about another receipt. But before I could finish, he demanded to see my manager, claiming he wouldn't deal with this nonsense. At this point, I'm more than happy to call my manager. I pressed the button on my phone to page them, and within a minute, my manager arrives. My manager asked what the problem was. Before I can explain, the customer jumps in, complaining that I was giving him a hard time about returning the cleaning solution and insisting he bought it with the machine. When I tried to explain my side, he immediately accused me of interrupting him. My manager, bless them, tries to handle the situation diplomatically, suggesting we check for another receipt. That's when the customer sarcastically asked if we were really going to be this difficult. And then, in a move that left both me and my manager speechless, he grabs the bottle of solution and storms out of the store. He was so caught up in his tantrum that he completely forgot about the deposit for the carpet cleaner. You know, the money we hold on to make sure people return the machines in good condition. After he left, my manager and I just looked at each other for a moment before bursting into laughter. We looked up his information in our system afterward. Guess what? There was no record of him ever purchasing that solution from our store. Not on the day he rented the cleaner, not the day before, not ever. That deposit he stormed out without collecting, it was $100. So basically this guy threw away $100 because he couldn't admit he was trying to return something he never bought in the first place. We kept expecting him to come back for his deposit once he cooled down, but it's been a few days now and we haven't seen him. I guess his pride was worth more than $100. Or maybe he realized we'd figured out his little scam and decided to cut his losses. Either way, I'm still amazed at how someone could get so worked up about being caught in what was obviously an attempt to get money for something they never purchased. But I guess that's retail for you. Just when you think you've seen it all, someone comes along and proves you wrong. As a celebration to being fully vaccinated, myself and my family decided we were going to go away for a week to go whale watching. Such a trip needs supplies, so my family heads to the Market of Walls to get groceries and such. So to start, what we were wearing. My mother was wearing a blue dress with short sleeves, trimmed with white flowers design and beige khakis. Oh yeah, she also has a service dog too, vest and all. A brace dog for those who are curious. My father was wearing a gray button-up shirt and black pants. Finally, I was wearing blue jeans and a green shirt that read, "I'd make a Zelda pun, but I don't want to try and force it." Service dog, who I will shorten to Doggo, was wearing his service vest. When we entered the Market of Walls, My mother and father went one way, and I went the other way. I was to get things like sunscreen and stuff, while my parents got the food. We were bringing our own food since the food there is super expensive. As such, this part is secondhand from my parents, but I will embellish with the classic Karen tropes. They were in the frozen food aisle picking out some burgers and sausages for our grills. They first heard Karen make the classical polite request for attention while choosing between Mozza burgers and BBQ sauce burgers. They had just ignored it, but my mother felt Doggo tugging at the leash, trying to get her attention. Not something he was trained to do, just really smart. Mom turned around and saw our Karen for this story. She was clearly confused by the blue dress and began asking my mom for directions to items in the aisles. My mother explained she didn't work there, which triggered Karen's anger. My father heard the conflict and approached them, but the gray button-up shirt made Karen mistake him for a manager. I wish I could explain more, but as I said, this was secondhand. At this point, Karen must have stepped on Doggo's tail, because as I was heading back to find my parents, I heard poor Doggo yelp loudly, which is out of character for him, and I took off running. I arrived at the scene with my mother trying to comfort Doggo, his tail slightly red from blood, and my mother tending to it, my father arguing with Karen, and an employee wearing a blue shirt, black pants, and an apron coming up. The employee tried understanding the situation while Karen complained about my mother and the supposed manager being disrespectful. The employee attempted explaining that we were customers, but Karen wouldn't listen. I quietly asked the employee to fetch the real manager, then approached Karen. I should note I run role-playing games, and through that have learned how to improvise. When I asked about the situation, Karen questioned who I was. I claimed to be the manager, which made my father give me a confused look, but I gestured for him to stay quiet. Karen scoffed at my appearance and young looks, dismissing me as just some kid despite my being 29. I then questioned her assumptions about my parents working there, which made her pause and think. My father, seeing I had control of the situation, went to help my mother, who doesn't handle stress well. When I asked about what happened to Doggo, Karen claimed ignorance. I warned her about the value and importance of service dogs, and when she tried to leave, I told her to stay put until the manager arrived. She seemed intimidated enough to comply, which surprised me for reasons I'll explain later. The manager finally arrived after about 10 minutes, apparently not seeing the urgency, along with 2 police officers someone had called. Karen made weak attempts to defend herself, but her previous confidence had vanished. The manager confirmed through security footage that Karen had stomped on Doggo's tail when he positioned himself between my mom and Karen. The footage also showed what appeared to be Karen kicking Doggo, though this was due to his tail position. I was furious but let my parents handle the situation. They pressed charges and the manager personally covered our groceries, apologizing and mentioning he should have banned her earlier. When we got back to the van, I started crying. You see, something I neglected to say was I am not a confrontational person. Seeing Doggo hurt, my mother crying and my dad about to deck Karen, I snapped and was actually scared of what I would do. If Karen hadn't stood down, I was a bit afraid of what I might have done. Luckily, it didn't come to that. Mom is staying home with Doggo today while myself and my dad do some running around. She is still shaken up and we would rather not add more stress to her. Thanks for reading and sorry it's a bit messy. I just wanted to get this down. I needed to get this off my chest and felt writing about it would help. Court is hopefully going to be after the whale watching trip, but I haven't heard anything about it. Important update. 1. Doggo is physically going to be okay. The veterinarian explained that the injury was a shallow scrape that should heal well. However, when not on duty, Doggo would need to wear what we call the cone of bravery until the injury heals, to prevent him from making it worse. Regarding his mental state, while we don't have a complete assessment yet, he appears to be behaving normally around family. As for the legal consequences facing Karen, the charges include interference of service animal, willful injury of a service animal, animal abuse, assault, destruction of property, disrupting the peace, and more. The potential sentence could be up to 5 years in prison at minimum, though nothing has been officially decided yet. I'll keep you posted. I used to be a delivery driver for a building materials company, handling the smaller loads that weren't big enough for our semi-trucks. After working various retail jobs through college, I thought this would be a nice change of pace. Just me, my truck, and the open road delivering lumber and construction materials around the Dallas-Fort Worth area. The company had this weird policy where delivery drivers had to wear these fancy uniforms, complete with pressed shirts and everything. Their reasoning was that we were customer service representatives or whatever. I mean, I get it, but it felt a bit much when I'm just hauling lumber around all day. So there I was, about 5 months into the job, making what seemed like a routine delivery to this fancy residential area. The GPS took me to this construction site where they were building these massive houses that probably cost more than I'll make in 10 years. I started unloading the materials, minding my own business, when this woman comes storming out of the house next door. She immediately started yelling at me about needing my workers to keep down the noise from their nail guns and other tools. Before I could even finish explaining that I didn't work for the builders, she cut me off. She insisted that she'd seen me there before talking to the workers and complained that the noise was disturbing her precious 12 o'clock nap. I tried to explain again, keeping my cool despite her attitude. I repeated that I didn't work for the builders and suggested she take her complaints to the construction office if she had issues with the noise. But she wasn't having any of it. Instead, she demanded my corporate number. That's when I had my moment of brilliance. You see, my manager was this really cool guy who had a great sense of humor and knew how to handle difficult people. So I gave her his direct number, watching as this massive, self-satisfied grin spread across her face. She probably thought she'd just won the lottery or something. I finished dropping off the rest of my delivery and headed back to the warehouse, not thinking much about it. When I got back, my manager called me aside, and I could tell he was trying hard not to laugh. He asked me if I'd given a lady his number earlier. When I confirmed and asked what she'd said, that's when he lost it completely. Just burst out laughing right there in the middle of the warehouse. He told me, between fits of laughter, that he'd never had so much fun convincing a lady he was going to fire me. Apparently, she had called him up all high and mighty, demanding that I be fired immediately for refusing to stop the construction noise. She went on this long rant about how she needed her beauty sleep and how I was personally responsible for ruining her entire day. My manager, being the legend he is, played along for a bit, making her think she was getting her way. He told her he would take care of the situation immediately and that he was deeply concerned about her nap schedule. Then he explained very slowly and clearly that we were just a delivery company and had absolutely nothing to do with the construction noise. When she tried to argue, he just kept repeating it until it finally sank in. She hung up in such a rage that my manager said he could hear her screeching even as she was pulling the phone away from her face. He thought it was the funniest thing that had happened all month and actually bought me lunch the next day for giving him such quality entertainment. I kept that delivery route for another few months, and every time I drove past that house, I made sure to honk my horn extra loud. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.